The Atlantic may have been calm for much of the season, but the atmosphere is beginning to shift, and signs of change are building quickly. Several disturbances have emerged across the basin, and forecasters are warning that the coming days could mark the start of a far more active phase. Among the greatest concerns is the potential for a rare and unpredictable phenomenon called the Fujiwhara effect, where two storms interact so closely that they begin to orbit one another, altering their paths and creating uncertainty about where they may eventually travel. What looked like a quiet, uneventful year has suddenly transformed into a scenario filled with complexity and risk. In recent days, models that once pointed toward a harmless turn away from land have shifted dramatically, suggesting that high pressure could trap one of the developing systems closer to the United States coastline. That kind of change has raised new questions about possible impacts for the Southeast, particularly in the Carolinas, Georgia, and even Florida. While forecasters remain cautious, the situation is evolving quickly enough to keep residents on edge, as projections have swung within just 48 hours from confidence in a safe path out to sea to scenarios that suggest a much closer brush with land. The interaction between these two systems has only added to the uncertainty. Normally, when a stronger storm develops alongside a weaker one, the more powerful system pulls the other into its circulation and effectively absorbs it. At first, that seemed to be the most likely outcome, with one disturbance expected to fade as the dominant storm carried on its track across the Atlantic. But the situation has shifted. Slowing movement, combined with strengthening high pressure to the north, may now prevent that absorption from happening. Instead, the storms could remain separated or even be pushed apart, introducing yet another layer of complexity. This back and forth leaves forecasters cautious, knowing that sudden changes can make preparation difficult for communities that might soon be in the path. The clock is already ticking. If one of these disturbances strengthens further, a tropical cyclone designation could be issued as early as tomorrow, opening the door for watches and warnings to follow shortly afterward. That means heavy rain bands could reach parts of the Southeast by late Sunday, with possible landfall early next week. Florida, the Carolinas, and even portions of Georgia may begin to feel effects sooner than expected. The rapid development is what has experts most concerned, because with limited time to prepare, when it comes to tropical systems, it's never wise to judge them solely by their category or the initial wind speed estimates. Time and again, storms labeled as just a tropical storm or only a Category 1 have ended up inflicting damage that far exceeded expectations. The reason often lies not in the winds alone, but in the rain. A storm that slows as it nears the coast can drench communities for days, flooding rivers, overwhelming drainage systems, and cutting off entire regions. Early projections suggest that this developing system could do exactly that. If it stalls or curves near land, the Carolinas and Georgia could see days of soaking rain, and even Florida may begin to experience outer rain bands as early as the weekend. Add to this the possibility of a low-pressure system funneling moisture into the storm's circulation, and the potential for widespread inland flooding grows even greater. Forecasters are also uneasy because of the ocean beneath these systems. Sea surface temperatures across the western Atlantic are running abnormally warm, 84 to 86 degrees in many areas, and the deeper waters hold an even larger reservoir of heat energy. This creates ideal conditions for sudden bursts of strengthening, especially if wind shear remains light. History has shown how quickly a storm can defy expectations in such an environment. Storms that were initially forecast as minor, like Dorian or Michael, eventually intensified into monsters, proving that initial projections often underestimate the true potential. Computer models, especially high-resolution runs that specialists often rely on, are already hinting that this disturbance could grow stronger than a simple tropical storm, with some outputs suggesting the possibility of a Category 1 hurricane or more. This is why caution is being urged. Even as the official guidance leans conservative, the ingredients are all there for rapid intensification if the storm organizes just right. The warm waters, the favorable atmospheric phases, and the seasonal timing are aligning in ways that have surprised meteorologists before. September into October has always been the peak period for hurricanes in this region. And with the environment primed as it is now, no one is comfortable dismissing what could unfold. The tracks being generated by the most trusted models are beginning to narrow in on the southeastern coastline, and when both the European and American models start showing agreement, forecasters know the threat must be taken seriously. For much of this season, storms that formed in the Atlantic followed a familiar pattern. They curved north and then east, harmlessly spinning out into the open ocean. That trend was made possible by large openings in the atmosphere, gaps between pressure systems that allowed developing hurricanes to escape. But that pattern now appears to be breaking down. A new frontal system is descending, weakening as it drops southward, while at the same time, high-pressure ridges are building to the west and east. The result is a kind of atmospheric squeeze, trapping disturbances in place rather than letting them slip away. High-pressure systems rotate clockwise, and when they block off the northward path, they can effectively nudge storms farther west, closer to land. This is exactly what the most recent model runs have begun to show. What only a day ago seemed like a sure turnout to sea is no longer guaranteed. Instead, the latest projections are hinting at a bend toward the southeast, a subtle shift that could make the difference between a storm dissipating offshore and one pressing directly toward populated coastlines. Meteorologists often say that trends are your friends, not because they want to see danger increase, but because consistent shifts in model output so many days out cannot be ignored. Each successive update has leaned a little farther west, and as those trends accumulate, the possibility of a land impact becomes more difficult to dismiss. The uncertainty remains high, but the danger is that confidence in a safe track may have been misplaced. Even if this storm does not make a direct landfall, the squeeze between high and low pressure systems could keep it lingering close enough to unleash heavy rains, coastal flooding, and dangerous surf. The Southeast has been fortunate so far this season, spared the worst of what the tropics can deliver. But as conditions line up in late September and early October, prime time for hurricanes in the western Atlantic, the margin for error is narrowing. With so much energy available in the oceans and the atmosphere shifting into alignment, forecasters are warning that the period of calm may be over, replaced instead by the risk of a much more volatile end to the season. One of the clearest warning signs lies beneath the surface of the ocean itself. Water temperatures across the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf are running hotter than normal, with wide swaths registering in the mid-80s. At first glance, that may not seem dramatic, but for hurricanes, those numbers are fuel. The difference between 82 degrees and 86 degrees can determine whether a system stays a modest tropical storm or erupts into a major hurricane. What makes this even more concerning is the ocean heat content, warm water not just on the surface, but extending deep below. This reservoir of energy allows storms to continue intensifying even after churning for days, because each new layer of water they draw from is just as hot as the one before. Recent history has shown how quickly this can transform a storm. In just a matter of hours, hurricanes like Michael and Dorian leapt from modest categories to devastating monsters, catching many by surprise. That same potential exists now. With La Niña reducing wind shear and other atmospheric patterns lining up to support development, experts believe conditions are primed for a late-season surge. September and October have always carried that risk, but this year the threat may be amplified. The Gulf of Mexico, in particular, remains a hotspot of concern. Its enclosed waters tend to trap heat, and with lighter winds aloft, disturbances that reach the region could have a clear path to strengthen. This raises the unsettling prospect of storms forming closer to home. While many of the long-track systems from Africa fizzled earlier in the season because of dry air and Saharan dust, the focus is now shifting westward. As cold fronts dip south and collide with tropical moisture from Central America, the Gulf and Caribbean become fertile ground for new cyclones. Some of these systems can develop quickly, spinning up in a matter of days and leaving little time for preparation. The memory of past late-season storms that rapidly intensified over these waters serves as a reminder. Even after a quiet summer, it takes only one storm in the right place at the wrong time to rewrite the story of the season. Tying back to the unusual season, the chaotic atmosphere, and the urgency forecasters feel as the threat draws closer. This season has been anything but typical. Instead of steady development across the Atlantic, dry air, lingering frontal boundaries, and shifting pressure systems disrupted the usual flow. Waves that often become long-track storms fizzled early, and many cyclones bent harmlessly toward Europe rather than pushing into the Americas. For weeks, it seemed as though the season might pass without major incident. But that quiet was deceptive. The pieces are now aligning in ways that favor rapid change, and the storms gathering in the Atlantic reflect that turn. Meteorologists describe the atmosphere as chaotic, a puzzle where each shift in pressure or sea surface temperature can suddenly reshape the entire picture. Attention is now fixed on the models, which continue to adjust with each new run. Trends are bending westward, not eastward, and that fact alone demands caution. Emergency managers are already making preparations, knowing that landfall or close coastal impacts could arrive within days rather than weeks. Even without a direct strike, the potential for heavy rainfall, storm surge, and dangerous surf is real, and the speed of the storm's development may give residents little time to prepare. The possibility of the rare Fujiwhara effect, two storms dancing around each other and changing paths unpredictably, only adds to the uncertainty. The message from those watching closely is clear. Don't let the quiet weeks of summer create a false sense of security. Warm seas, favorable atmospheric phases, and a shifting jet stream mean the final stretch of the season could be its most dangerous. Whether this disturbance becomes a tropical storm, a hurricane, or something stronger, the window for complacency is closing. The coming days may determine not only the fate of these two storms, but the story of the entire season.